I'm Aaliyah Pavlova with Becker's Hospital Review. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. We are looking forward to hearing your questions. Additionally, in about a week following the webinar, we will be sending you a copy of the presentation to the email you used to register. At this time, it is now my pleasure to start today's presenter. Rich Madison is a network cycle, and he has been with St. Luke's University Health Network since April 2014 and has been working in the area of revenue cycle management for the past 35 years. Prior to St. Luke's, Rich served in executive level roles for several hospital organizations, including academic medical centers and multi-hospital systems. In addition, Rich worked in revenue cycle consulting at Ernst & Young, Capgemini Ernst & Young, Accenture, and KPMG. He left consulting partner and manager director for Accenture and KPMG, respectively. Rich has a BA in English from the University of Missouri and an MHA from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. He has been married to his wife, Mary, for 36 years and has 3 sons and a grandson. He lives in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. At this time, it is now my pleasure to introduce John Dwight, Vice President of Marketing and Partnerships for Simply, who will kick off today's presentation. John?
Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm really excited to be able to invite Rich to talk about the work that he and his team at St. Luke's are doing around this really important issue of transparency in the patient financial experience. And as we start up, I'm just going to spend a few minutes up front here talking about the motivation for investing in patient financial care. And we all come from I think some different perspectives or different stages of kind of understanding the challenge or the opportunity here. What I want to highlight in just the first few slides is really that this has moved from being something that is a nice to have to really a critical issue for all health systems. And it's critical not just within the revenue cycle in terms of making the patient financial experience easy and being able to collect on bills, but we're also seeing that there's a lot of actual clinical care for patients and how the making the financial experience easier actually really can impact on clinical care. So it's important for across the health system. So I'll spend a few minutes talking through that. And I start off with some really interesting data that came out recently and around the issue of affordability and the concerns that patients have and really how prevalent this is. This data on the left-hand side was really eye-opening for me when I saw it. And what it's telling us is, I think that seen anecdotally that healthcare and affordability is a concern for patients. What was really interesting in seeing the order of magnitude here was this is a general poll that was asking people about a series of issues and which ones are you the most concerned about in terms of what's happening today. And I think as all of us who have lived through the past couple of years in the U.S., there's a lot of things that are happening that draw people's concern. But out of that entire list, healthcare availability and affordability was the #1 thing that people worried a great deal about. And you can scan that list. That text is a little small, but there's things on there like unemployment, economy, size of the federal government. And among all of those, it's really the healthcare affordability that rises to the top as that top concern. And on the right-hand side, putting some dimension to it, what drives that is as healthcare deductibles have gone up, 1 in 2 patients are now facing a $1,000 responsibility that they face. And 2 in 3 households actually have less than $1,000 in savings. So the cost of healthcare is getting to a point where it's not at a level that is easily affordable out of savings or out of a monthly budget. And it's become a cost that is starting to look more like a larger purchase that you'd break into a number of monthly payments as opposed to something that many families could easily pay out of pocket when it's incurred. And we drill down now and look at the link between affordability and actual clinical care that I talked about in the front. And there's a pretty alarming data point there on the left, where when people were asked what they were more concerned about, either getting ill or paying for the care if they got ill, 40% of people said they were actually more afraid of paying for the care if they got seriously ill, versus 33% saying that they were concerned about getting ill in the first place. And the result of that, you can see on that right-hand side, is that 2 in 5 patients will actually skip a recommended test or treatment. So this is really the data that sets off alarm bells in terms of it's an important issue that's more than just an opportunity, but this is something that's really a must-have. This is an issue that we've got to focus on as a way to make sure that patients are not just able to afford to pay the bill, but aren't actually avoiding the care. And we're going to dig into this a little bit as Rich talks, but if you really think about what's going on here with affordability, there's a concern both around just the size of the cost of healthcare, but it's also really knowing what you're in for when you come in, and having transparency and understanding what your out-of-pocket will be early on is as important as being able to provide an affordable way to be able to pay that bill. I know Rich is going to get into some of the work they've been doing around both of those. And so finally, to close a bit of a lighter note, the good news here is when the patients win, the health system wins. There is a way to do this well. There's a strong link between patients being satisfied with their billing process and paying in full, and also in recommending that health system to others. So twice as likely to pay in full when patients are very satisfied with the billing experience, and they're 5 times as likely to recommend the health system. So as I get ready to transition over to Rich, I think what I want to leave with the stage setting is we've heard a lot about the need for consumerism. I'd say it's gotten beyond a need, and it's gotten to be a kind of critical component of what it means to be a patient in the health system today. And done well, this is really, there's a lot of opportunity to do well by the patients and for health systems to win as well. So with that, I want to turn over to Rich and have him walk through the investments they've made at St. Luke's and the great work that they've done and continue to do to bring consumerism into their patient experience. So Rich, with that, I'll turn over to you.
Thanks, John. And thanks, Beckers, for inviting me to share with everybody our journey at St. Luke's into providing easier access to patient information regarding their bills, and a whole host of the things that we've been working with Simply on and internally. So, John, the next slide will show just a little overview of St. Luke's University Health Network. We are one of the larger systems in the Lehigh Valley, which constitutes several counties, including New Jersey. We are 10 hospitals today. We'll be 11 in another year or so. The 13,000 employees that we employ are probably now larger than that after some recent acquisitions, and 1,300 physicians. You can see 86,000 admissions and almost 300,000 ED visits. More importantly to us is we have been identified as one of the top 100 hospitals by the IBM Watson survey, and more importantly, we've achieved that for 4 years in a row, and we're very proud of our achievement of those things. And we're the only Pennsylvania health system that has accomplished that. And John, the next slide. Our mission is pretty standard, I would say, but we do have an unwavering commitment to excellence, as it showed in the IBM Watson survey. We are an educational facility with a School of Medicine and a School of Nursing, so we are committed to the education of our physicians and our other healthcare providers. And we do obviously provide healthcare regardless of a patient's ability to pay. More importantly, though, our vision is reflective of our very visionary leadership around St. Luke's University Health System. We are committed more to achieving top decile performance, regardless of what it is, whether it's quality, safety, and financial. we are absolutely focused on maintaining that and achieving that. And we've done that in a couple of instances. Obviously, the IBM Watson, previously known as the Truven Awards. We've also been noted as one of the top EPIC performers in both the hospital and ambulatory applications. We do provide excellent service. And more recently, but kind of the guiding principle, we want our patients in our community to have easy access to our services, easy access to understanding the services they're being provided, and bottom line is understanding their financial impact as well. On the next slide. You know, where were we before we started this journey with Simply? We were an organization with multiple systems from Cerner, McKesson. We had IDX for our physician billing, Allscripts for our practice management. Our websites were separate, our billing statements were separate, and we heard our customers, the patients, loud and clear, and how confused they were, not only with the multiple statements that we generated, but also just giving them access to a web system that would enable them to pay easily. And it was very reflective of kind of that direction we're taking in terms of consumerism in healthcare. People wanted to have easier access. We'll talk about some of that a little later. So before we went on this journey with Simply, we did install Epic, both from an inpatient and ambulatory perspective. And we employed the single billing office in order to combine our statements, provide one point of entry for patients to pay their bills via online. We ensured that our organization was organized around the patient convenience, ensuring that we had adequate people to service any of the inbound calls. But we did recognize, as we were implementing Epic, that it does have its shortfalls. We needed a application that could assimilate all that Epic could output, but in a format that would be friendly to our patients, our customers. And that's why we've gotten to this point with Simply. We actually went through a decision process, and our emphasis was more on the patient experience versus collecting more money. I think we did a fairly adequate job collecting money from our patients, but it wasn't the easiest of processes. And we noticed that Epic has its shortcomings when it comes to that patient experience. So John, if you go to the next slide. Our goals were really, and we continue to focus on leveraging our technology to drive self-service adoption. That self-service capabilities, we initially looking at Simply to provide that support, but we are not leaving it alone just for self-service for patients making payments. As you'll see later, we are opening up options for patients to select the services that they would like to receive and maybe pay for it themselves. We're also looking at self-service registration to make it easier for that new consumer who is getting more comfortable with the mobile technologies that are available these days. We obviously wanted to increase our patient satisfaction. We listened to our customers complain about the access to our payment portal, complain about the lack of information that was provided on our statements, the separateness of our statements between the physicians and the hospitals. We also obviously wanted to improve our collections, and I think if you do the first two effectively, that's going to come naturally, and we'll talk a little bit about how we've seen improvements there. And also provide that price transparency. Patients want to know what they're paying for. They want to know what their financial exposure is going to be. And we'll show that a little later. And obviously, we want to reduce our expenses around collections. And you know, one of the costlier things for us, above the labor cost, are the paper statements related to mailings to patients. On the next slide, you know, we give an example of kind of the old statements that we used to use. They were limited in their information, really didn't have a call for action for the patient. Okay, we see that we owe money, and we know how old it is, and okay, what do we do next? Our website, as you can see on the right-hand side, nice picture of people, but once you got into it and tried to make a payment, it was pretty clunky and not very user-friendly. You had to enter more information than you know, I would like to do as a consumer. And when we were thinking about this, I think it was simply, it said, you know, our competition is not necessarily healthcare organizations. We're all trying to achieve the same thing. Our competition, really, in terms of patient experience, are the Amazons, the Costco's, those on-site retailers that make it extremely easy for patients or for customers and consumers to buy things that they're looking for. That's where we were trying to match ourselves against, not necessarily the competition in the area. On the next slide, you see the change that was made in terms of our statementing, where there's obvious call for action in terms of this is what is owed by you. You don't have to look deep into the details of the statement if you want. It gives you the points of access to make it easy for you to pay your bill. Now, the subsequent pages after that initial one will give you the detailed encounter information by hospital and by physician. On the right-hand side is our new payment portal, and it's a direct onto the payment portal that we have for the patients. And on the next slide, you'll see an example of what the patients will experience when they open their, get into their account. They'll see their individual encounters. They have options on what they want to pay. They have options to choose their visit to the Allentown campus to just pay that $72.20 bill. Or obviously we want to collect as much as they have outstanding, so we're going to ask them for the $4,000. But additionally, as John pointed out earlier, patients don't have, these are unexpected expenses for patients. They don't have the money necessarily to pay all that $4,000 off. So we want to give them options. And the payment plan that's suggested here is, you know, something that's more feasible for the patient to pay on a monthly basis. And it fits within our guardrails for policy so that we're not extending payment plans too far into the future. So with all that said, you know, what's our experience been to date? And what I did not kind of convey to you, if you go to the next slide, we send out emails giving the patients a heads up that they have an outstanding balance due before the statement is even generated. And we've had extreme success with that communication. And again, it points to our leveraging technology to communicate and provide information that is actionable by the patient. So when they receive this email, it gives them a call to action to go and enter into this patient portal to pay their bill. We have actually seen, as a result of that, 42% of our payments are coming in within 7 days of the emails being sent. This reduces the number of statements that we send out. It's getting our payments paid faster. And the response with 42%, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think is a remarkable experience that we're seeing happening. On the next page, you see, I'm sorry, John.
No, I was going to say, yeah, you're correct.
So on the next page, and John, you'll have to help me through some of this because a lot of this is where Simply is providing us information on how patients are actually using their own technology to access paying their bills. So we see that a majority of the views are being done via desktop, and payment is being made, for the most part, via their desktop. But what's really interesting is patients are also using their mobile technology, either their cell phones or their tablets, in order to make these payments as well. Meaning, you know, they get an email as they're sitting somewhere away from their computer, away from their home, and they get an email from St. Luke saying have an outstanding bill, which hopefully they were expecting. They can pay it right there as they're sitting waiting for the train to come to pick them up. Whatever the activity is that they are that they're using their cell phone. And what we're seeing is that 30% of those mobile online payments are coming through, which I was surprised at this information that we're actually beating other retail e-commerce industry, which is at 24%. So remarkable response by our community of consumers to the technology that we're beginning to show them that we're capable of doing. On the next slide, you'll see that 84% of the payments that we're receiving is actually an increase of 71% in our self-service. So patients are, rather than calling up the our customer service line to make a payment, which we still get a significant amount of, or sending the check in via the mail, we're seeing that 71% increase in patients doing it themselves online. And what that translates to is a reduction in the cost of the customer service support. And prior to Simply, we actually engaged an outsourcing vendor day one for our self-pay balances. We were able to eliminate the need for that vendor. And this annualized savings is a projection, but I have to report on this tomorrow to our C-level suite, and we are actually at over $500,000 at this point into the 5th month of our using this. So we're well on our way to achieving that savings that we were hoping for. And then more recently, on the next slide, John, will show that we introduced another form of technology to provide even more access and easier access for our patients through an IVR, interactive voice response, so that the patients who were actually calling our customer service agents to make a payment, 50% of them now are doing it automatically through their phone. Not only does it relieve a significant number of calls coming into our customer service people, but they can do it 24/7. And so it's now makes it much more convenient for these patients who want to rely on their telephones to make payment, that they can do it automatically as well. We also see that, we can estimate that we can have a labor savings of almost $300,000 with this shift in calls. But what we actually have done is we've shifted the focus of the customer service staff from inbound calls to making outbound calls for those consumers who need a little bit more motivation to pay their bills. So we're able to shift resources to that function. And on the next slide, you see that patients are very positive about their experience with this tool. 4.4 out of 5 stars is remarkable. You know, I'll point you back to our vision of making it easier access to our patients. And I was surprised when I saw some of these comments that the use of the word easy was pretty much repeated in a lot of cases. And we've been able to maintain that patient satisfaction from when we first started. In fact, if you go to the next slide, this Net Promoter Score, which I think is more focused on consumer industries, we've been very surprised at the response that we've gotten from our patients in comparing ourselves to the more notable retail brands in the market. We're comparing better than some of them, and much better than our competitors in terms of the healthcare industry. So all in all, this has been a very good, pleasing surprise for us in terms of the experience our patients are having with payments. The next section, we are currently live on all of what you've just seen. We're probably into this now 6 months, a little less than 6 months in total, and enjoying some very good experience with our patients. That's just one component of the platform that we're working with Simply on. The next couple are in place, and they kind of focus on a different perspective. Instead of payments, we're looking at giving patients the opportunities and more options in terms of how they want to interact with our healthcare providers. So this actual project that we're going to be looking at came from our internal discussions around price transparency. We went a little overboard with our direction with price transparency and came up with a program that we refer to as PriceChecker. On the next slide, kind of gives you the opportunity that we saw we were missing in terms of patients who, like John said in the beginning of the presentation, avoided healthcare because of the potential financial exposure, or they were expecting to receive healthcare and we experience cancellations, or they don't show up because of their fear for the financial impact. In the Lehigh Valley, we're very competitive. We have a very competitive market. Patient loyalty is a very important commodity for St. Luke's and for the other healthcare organizations in the Valley. We wanted to take it a step further. We wanted to, as St. Luke's, we wanted to provide patients with much more control of their healthcare selection, of their options, and what that means in terms of financial exposure for them. The next slide shows our kind of a summary of our PriceChecker program. This is a program that allows patients to select certain healthcare services, whether it's procedures, diagnostic testing, lab work, imaging services, and it offers them an option. One is there's what's called Price Lock, And that means of the services that are provided through PriceLock, we will guarantee one price that will be comprehensive to all the providers that are associated with the providing of that service. So in the instance of, say, one of our larger service uses is CAT scans, that will incorporate the hospital cost and the radiologist cost. They pay that for that service up front, and the good thing from an operations perspective, I don't generate a statement, the physicians don't generate a statement, and our account is paid in full, and the patient is paid in full. They'll not get a statement after the fact. More recently, we've partnered with Simply to really enhance that level of service options and incorporate not only the price lock, which is the comprehensive approach, but it will do a side-by-side comparison with what their insurance coverage means to them in terms of their out-of-pocket financial exposure. So if you go into this website and you select that CAT scan or MRI, it will come back to you with the price for the comprehensive price for PriceLock or the estimate based on your insurance coverage. And the next slide is kind of an example of what the patient will experience. And at this point, the patient has an option. They can choose the PriceLock price, or they can choose the post-insurance estimate. It's their choice. And I don't know the percentage of time that the PriceLock amount is better or the post-insurance estimate is more favorable, but it will provide that information to the patients. If they have any other questions, this will direct them to our financial navigators that will take them through a series of options and explore these price differences for them and come up with the best option for them. In fact, of all the inbound calls to our financial navigators, probably about 40% of those calls that result in a service being scheduled use the PriceLock, and the remaining 60% have chosen an alternative path, meaning they determined that their insurance was a better option. So that's our PriceChecker program, and that has seen some significant positive patient experience in terms of literally giving them the financial options that are available to them for coming to St. Luke's. On the next slide, this is a new approach that we're taking with payment plans. We know that patients have affordability issues, and it depends on their particular situation. It depends on their payment behaviors, depends on their experience with healthcare and their out-of-pocket responsibilities. But we know that a certain segment of our patient population have to use payment plans because it's an unexpected expense to them. And we've partnered with Simply to come up with an approach that, again, will provide our patients with options in terms of payment plans that are customized, in quotation marks, for them. And that is reasonable for them. So working with Simply, the next slide is just what goes into determining how patients can pay their bills. Very much like if you've used the propensity to pay indicators that come from some of those external third-party software. We are using simply algorithms to determine the best option for our patients, and basically coming up with a healthcare FICO score based on, one, their insurance, what their particular demographics are, what are the amounts of their outstanding bills due, what has their historical payment behavior been, and putting that into an algorithm that comes up with essentially a propensity to pay, and who's going to pay their bill in full, who's going to have some issues paying it in full, and what are the options. So from, on the next slide, for an example, if an individual has the capacity, the propensity to pay, and meets that FICO criteria that suggests that if they're presented with the statement, they're going to pay the statement in full. We now will be presenting them an option of $600, pay your balance in full. They still have the options of going online and creating a payment plan based on our guidelines. But this is the initial communication that we would send to the patient. On the other hand, in this particular example, Sophia has a number of accounts outstanding. She pays the minimal amount on a routine basis, or she does not pay at all. Is there a reason why she's doing that? Maybe it's the behavior that we've kind of formulated looking at her history. What we want to provide that patient is an option right off the bat. That, our statement shows an outstanding balance of $600, but we know that you can't pay that, or we're assuming based on your history that you're not going to be paying that in full. So we want to provide options right off the bat for that individual, and provide them options to pay their balance off over time. And this will provide that to them. On the next slide, it kind of provide, if they go online, they'll have that same, like I said, they'll have the Lisa who likes to pay her bills off on time in full. She still has the option to make a payment plan if she wants. But for Sophia, we'll provide her the various options that we think would be more supportive of her particular situation. But also, my job is to collect cash for the organization, so we still want to give them the option to pay in full, but also offer suggestions that they can make payment plans. That's our newest platform that we've just started with. Simply, we don't have enough feedback right now to formulate what we're doing, but it's my understanding Memorial Hermann has been doing this for a while and has seen some positive responses to it. Those are some of the things we're working with Simply on. We do have another PriceChecker variation in the works, but we're still working through some of the details on that. So really, in closing, we're responding to the age of consumerism. We want to make sure that patients have access to their information, have easy access to their information. And we do rely, and we do feel that there's new technology that can really enable that more positive experience for our patients, and take advantage of some of the things that we've seen in the retail markets, and apply them to our healthcare situation. And then obviously, driving financial results and satisfaction for our patients. That's, number one on our priorities as an organization. So with that, I guess that concludes the presentation. And if anybody has any questions, I guess I'll turn it back over to John and Aaliyah.
Thank you, Rich, for that fantastic presentation. We will now begin today's question and answer session. Please submit any questions you have by typing them into your control panel in the space labeled Enter a Question for Staff and clicking Send. We will try to get through as many questions as we have time for. We have had a lot of great questions come in, and the first audience member wants to know what drove your decision to adopt Simply as your portal.
We actually went through we have an innovations initiative here at St. Luke's, and we are looking at all innovative technologies available to bring to the table. And one of our priority projects was improving that connection with the patient experience in terms of paying their bills. We looked at 2 firms, and by far Simply turned out to be much more reflective of that experience that we wanted the patients to have. And funny, when we were going through this selection, the facilitators for this selection process that we used really were trying to help us focus on improving our collections, and we kept on bringing them back. And this was a consortium of healthcare systems. We kept on bringing them back to, no, it's the patient experience that we know is going to be the positive generation of cash as long as they have a positive experience. And we're seeing that.
That is a great point, thank you. Another audience member is wondering what system or application was used to create the consolidated bill for the guarantor.
We use Epic and the single billing office application, and we provide simply an extract for developing that statement.
Great, thank you for clarifying that. The next question is, do you foresee also using this platform for scheduling and reminders?
That's kind of the next frontier for us. As I said, we are very committed to offering self-service for all the things that we're doing in interacting with patients, at least on the administrative side of things. So for registration, scheduling, we are definitely looking for automating those and providing that self-service experience to the patient.
Great, thank you. The next question is, does the price lock feature include insurance coverage? A follow-up to that, in the post-insurance model, how is the cost determined?
So the price lock and price estimator, it focuses on I think we're up to maybe 600 different line item services that are available through PriceChecker. And we provide a historical 2-year look back on all the payer plans that we have in the system and what their average out-of-pocket payment would have been for that service.
Great, thank you for answering that question. The next question is your patient estimation tool homegrown or commercial based?
Both. The homegrown aspect of this is what I just suggested, and we provide that information to simply to match up with the healthcare services in the PriceChecker platform. We also use a commercial-based estimator that includes all of our contract information.
That is really interesting, thank you. This next audience member wants to know if Simply integrates with the EMR portal.
The EMR portal, not sure I can answer that question. It definitely is a. I don't. That's more technical. I might screw that answer up. I know that and then I'll let John.
Yeah,
no problem. We can.
The answer is yes. Yeah.
Awesome. So the next question, we'll move on, is, does propensity to pay use a non-credit based scoring method so soft hits on credit are avoided?
Yeah, that does not use the, if you will, the Experian database. It does not use that to determine that capacity to pay. It's internal
Great.
to algorithms that Simply has come up with.
Thank you for that answering that question. This looks like the last question that we are going to have time for today. But I will ask, does this move towards a better financial care strategy require a change in IT infrastructure or prioritization from your internal IT team?
Well, that's a loaded question. Our IT and operational priorities are always aligned based on the projects that we go into together with. We are always, our structure is always operational led with IT support. So if we see the need and we can develop the return on investment, that usually will become a priority for the organization, and as such for our IT people.
Awesome. That is all we have time for today. I want to thank Rich for his excellent presentation and Simply for sponsoring today's webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we look forward to having you join us for future webinars.